Okay, welcome to our Friday stream. I'm going to switch to a share screen here. Oh, that's odd. Why did that? All right, well, here it is. This is going to be my newest one here. I was going to call it the Genesis 4 Revelation. It'll be in the same area. All right, today we're on stream 11. And I'm just going to kind of pick up from the one before. Find it here. It's about 97, I think. And that'll be picking up from where we left off. Yep, 98, stream 11. So we're talking about the ladder of heaven in stream 10, about the connection of I am, the Lord God of Abraham, and that connection from when Jacob struggled with the angels. So Isaac had just passed the covenant promises on to Jacob at a place called Luz, which Jacob changed to Bethel, which means the house of God. And I believe that house of God is going to turn out to be Mount Sinai. So my question was, would the ladder to heaven be on some other mountain than the holy mountain? But there's more reasons I think Mount Sinai is Luz. So I'm just thinking out loud. Has the true location of the holy mountain really been that hard to find? Because so hard that it's taken 3,500 years for someone to put their finger on it. So how can you prove the history of the existence of the Israel people without proving the Exodus? If you can't show because most of the miracles were coming out of Egypt and around Mount Sinai. So if you can't prove that history, that's been the problem for the last 3,500 years. We've got a lot of people who study the Bible and turn out to be that they're atheists because they have not found this proof of the existence of anything about that would prove up the existence of the Exodus coming through. Of course, they're looking at the wrong Mount Sinai. They're looking at the Mount Sinai in the Sinai Peninsula, which is technically Egypt. And now that they've found the Exodus is in Mount Sinai and they've found all these proofs of the Exodus, I'm just saying I think all these pastors around the world need to know that so they can realize that they can show people now all these things that are in, there's some things from Genesis, but let's just cover the things that are actually in the book of Exodus. You just go through the book of Exodus. The things that you read that should be at Mount Sinai, you can find them at the real Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia. So the foundational teaching of God's chosen is their idea of having power with God. That's where it comes from. Most of the miracles detailed in the Bible happen in the Exodus and in close proximity of Mount Sinai. So it's really important that we found that now, because you can go through the Bible and show people all these things are there like they should be. And I'm just saying it should be real easy, though, to see that huge mountain with the black top on it from space, especially now we've got these satellites. It shouldn't be too hard to just look around, fly over it with a plane or something, and find the Mount Sinai. It kind of stands out. Now, I wrote on here, this public sold the idea that it's okay to die by sorcery. There was I forget where it was. It was over in Europe. Anyway, this woman, her husband died after he had gotten this AstraZeneca jab, in other words, and had died a day or two later. And she was like, well, she's willing to die, if that would help other people. So it's okay for people to die by sorcery, apparently, or at least some people think that. So starting with number 99 in Genesis now, in 32, 24 to 30 is where Jacob wrestled with a man. That's what it says. But then the man is an angel, as it turns out. And Jacob says he's seeing God face to face. And you'll be able to see this okay. It might not turn out quite as good on the internet here, but it'll look fine because this is in a PDF. I use coloring, but you will be able to see it fine. In verse 28, this is where the angel changes Jacob's name to Israel and defines Israel as power with God or prevailed. He prevailed with God. Yeah, each Bible can stay slightly different, but that's the idea. Ruling with God is the other idea we get from other scriptures, like Psalms. But before this event, in Genesis 32, 1 through 2, Jacob had met the angels of God, it says. Now, this is just before he met Esau. So he's returning to his land, and he was commanded to do that. So in verse 9 through 12, Jacob called on God and quoted a prophecy. And he's referring back to this prophecy about the ladder to heaven, 28, 13 to 15, and 31, 3 and 13. He's supposed to have a posterity, these angel tells him, which cannot be numbered, plus for Yahovah to shield him from harm on his return to the land of his kindred. So my question really is going to boil down to this. Where are all these kindred tribes? We've gone over the prophecies in Genesis, and now we're just getting to really what I think is the most important part, where all these blessings at the end in chapter 48 and 49. So we're going to be doing that next week. But these kindred spread out. They went to Mount Sinai, and then we know the story from there on. But when we get to the New Testament, we just come up with the idea that there's only this one little group of people living in Jerusalem, and none of the pastors seem to know where the rest of the kindred people are. Now, I got Eli James with us here today, and I'd like him to talk about that. Now, I'd like you, Pastor, to put your 2 cents in. Let's let Eli start with what he thinks first. Okay. Where these kindred people are today, or let's put it this way. Starting at the time Christ came and he was killed, where were the kindred people spread out around the world as far as you would be concerned?
Well, at around 33 AD, we had a great migration across the Caucasus Mountains. That was actually prophesied in the book of Isaiah 11:16 that it would be a second exodus of the people of Israel across the Caucasus Mountains into Europe. So, and that was 745 years, so almost 800 years before the crucifixion, right? So our people had migrated into Europe, north, west, and to some degree east in Europe, and they had gone there by different names, like the Saxons, the Saka, the Scythians, and sometimes by their tribal names. They were known locally by their tribal names. But historically, the Greek historians and the Roman historians and the German historians gave them different names, and that's how they became lost. And many of them were paganized, so they lost their identity. But essentially, the Germans, the Danes, the Swedes, the French.
In other words, they weren't called by the name Israelite.
No,
they were just called more like family names or names that of the language of where they were. Those people gave them, you referred to them by a name, which right. became everybody knew they were Israelites. That's the point. And some of them would have known about Christ, or do you think generally that idea was lost on them?
Well, during the migrations, probably by 33 AD in Europe, let's talk about the Vikings, for example, the furthest north, and they're primarily of the tribe of Dan. They probably lost their memory of being Israel for quite some time, and they were so paganized that they no longer performed any Israelite rituals. However, interestingly, the Vikings retained the right of the eldest son. And so where would pagans come up with an idea like that if they weren't Israelite? That was actually an Israelite tradition. But unfortunately, the eldest son typically disinherited his younger brothers. And so they ran off in their Viking ships and raided other countries, okay? That was actually caused by the fact of the elder son tradition of Israelites. But many, of course, in the south was Charlemagne and the Holy Roman Empire that developed. So it's hard to say how many of those people remember being Israelites. I think the general knowledge of it, but there were always people who retained records of it. For example, Queen Elizabeth II has a record of all of her ancestors as 153 generations from Adam through David But Christ is not included because he did not have any heirs. Okay, but the Davidic covenant is clearly recorded in her genealogy. So there have always been people who know it, but it wasn't commonly understood. Plus, our people were so spread out. The evangelization of ministers really didn't start until the era right after Christ died. And so Paul was trying to tell the dispersed Israelites that they were, in fact, Israelites. He's reminding them of their Israelite heritage. So it took this knowledge quite a while to spread into Europe. But obviously, the Judahites knew about it, and but some Judahites had migrated to Rome, and some had migrated to Alexandria in Egypt, where they would start to forget, after generation would forget their heritage. So, um, generally speaking, the vast majority of Israelites forgot their heritage and had to be converted back through the blood of Christ. That's how I see that.
Huh. I've mentioned already, me and Pastor talked a little bit about the fact that there's a Hebrew versions or multiple Hebrew versions of the New Testament now that have been found in libraries in Catalan and in India as well. They found two copies of the New Testament. And the whole, so we've got, I don't know how many actual copies of Hebrew now of the whole New Testament, but even Revelation and the whole bit. So that's an interesting thing because obviously someone was keeping track of the language. It wasn't a dead language if they were writing the New Testament in it. And the whole point about that is apparently from the people that have been looking at, like Dr. Miles Jones, for example, said, well, that he can tell that these Greek versions that we're working from to make our English Bibles actually came from the Hebrew version originally because he could tell from the way the translations are done. There's a big story there that I think would change a lot of the way we're teaching the New Testament. What do you think, Pastor?
Well, I've seen examples. I haven't had a chance to read volumes yet, but the samples I've seen certainly put the ability. For instance, John 1:1-3 is written where they actually changed the word from "in the beginning was the Word." They put it "in the beginning was Jesus Christ," and it was pointing out the deity of Christ as being God. And I think that will have a great impact because one of the things that's being fought today is that there's a crew of people among us that seem to think that it's impossible for Jesus to be God and God to be Father all at the same time. Well, I don't have a problem. Just because I don't understand the concept doesn't mean that I don't believe it's correct. And that's the way I feel about the Trinity as such. Maybe the word Trinity is the wrong word to use. I don't know. It's not in the Bible, but the word Godhead is, and it says in Jesus Christ is the fullness of the Godhead. So I have to believe that He is God. But I think Eli has a fairly good handle on where the people have gone, and you have to understand. If you look at America today, we're only 200 years old or a little better. And let's face it, most of our younger people today have lost their heritage. They don't know who they are. They don't know where they came from. They don't know how our land was settled or how it was made. So it's not hard to understand that if people go into captivity and are living among strangers, that they're going to take on that culture to a great degree. And if they do, they lose what they had when they came. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But where do you think I mean, I know we know that Paul was wanting to go like to Spain, for example, which was the Iberian Peninsula, which was basically the name for the land of the Hebrews. So we know he was going there, and we know there was uh, his kind of spacing out the name was from the 10 Isles. Joseph of Arimathea was from the 10 Isles. So he was selling tin and maybe other metals into that area. So he was over in England. So that's where he was coming from. We know that. So we know that there was a certain amount of Israelites in that all the way to Ireland. We pretty much established those kind of things. So that right there has got to stand for something. Go ahead.
Yes. Well, I think Jesus Christ went with his uncle into those areas, telling his people that he had another sheepfold that he had to talk to. And also, uh, we noticed that when the Israelites moved, the prophet Isaiah and others said that they would move north and west primarily. There are verses that say they went northeast, south, and west, but they did not settle in, for instance, in Africa as a whole or in China as a whole. They went rather to countries which they carried the name of Isaac's sons. I think uh, the fact that they're called Saxons is certainly an evidence that they came from that lineage. And so today we say most of the Israelites is going to be among the nations of Adam and his race, and that would be in Europe, and that would be in America, that would be in Australia, New Zealand, of course. And there have been great discussions about the Dutch who went to South Africa. Some believe that maybe that was not of the Lord for them to go, although the Lord did protect them when they were there. So I think you have to look among the Saxon people of the world, and that's where you're going to find them.
Yeah, well, there's some reasons that it used the word kindred in the New Testament, and it talks some about the names of various tribes. And then James mentions all the tribes there, the book of Hebrews and so forth. And the whole idea of all 12 tribes being brought back together under Christ is the main prophecy all the way through Scripture.
Right.
So there's no idea, shouldn't be any idea that Christ didn't accomplish the prophecies. Because when you act like, well, he didn't accomplish the prophecies that were all given in the Old Testament, then that means everything he said was basically a lie. You're calling him a liar if his prophecies don't come true. His prophecies are not dependent on you; they're dependent on him.
Right.
He's the one that's going to do the prophecy, not you. You can opt out anytime you want and be destroyed if you prefer. And we're going to talk about that just a little bit today. So let's just continue on from where we are. His whole prophecy from the very beginning is that Christ was going to shield Abraham from harm. That's Genesis 15:1. Done a lot of work showing that has to be Christ speaking because it connects through Genesis. Now, in 31, this is Genesis 31, 1 through 10, Yahovah is speaking to Jacob. It says God. And verse 24, 29, 42, and 53, God warned Laban to settle their differences peacefully. So Laban and was coming after Jacob, in other words, because he kind of left without really giving Laban a warning, left with his wives, which was Laban's daughter. So, or 2 daughters plus 2 handmaids. Let's just put it that way. So, the vow that Jacob swore in 28, 20 to 22 is connected in everything that happens up to his peaceful return to his land, which was prophesied by I am in 28, 12 through 15. So here he's given a prophecy. He's told he'll be that God will shield him from harm and giving a peaceful return to the land. So everything he does is based on those prophecies, where he's got this angel, as we see later, who's going with him, which is Christ. I mean, it's the same concept. So it's I am, in other words, or Yahovah, who is blessing all the families of the earth. I'm sorry, that's his phone laying in here. And the posterity of Jacob as the 12 tribes, who is the object of the blessing. So it's Christ is the one that's doing the work. Okay. Right. It's an unconditional covenant. And here it says, which are located west, east, north, and south of Bethel, which I'm saying is most likely Mount Sinai, as the prophecy says in verse 14. So in 28:14, it's where you have this prophecy, west, east, north, and south. So that would be from Mount Sinai or Bethel. And that goes all the way back to there. Now, he's shielded by Christ the Son. That's the correct context of the blessing of the families of the earth, is that Christ is blessing the families which come from Jacob. Hold on just a second. You might want to do something with that because it makes a lot of noise when it goes off. Your cell phone over there just went off, and it's making a lot of noise in the background.
Sorry.
All right, so and Christ is coming from Abraham's posterity, as Matthew 1:1 states, and he's blessing those who call on him, as all these examples we're given show, just in Genesis. So they're all Israelites who have power with God as a family heritage because Christ works for them. So that's the concept. That's Christian Israel, in other words. You can't reject Yahovah and then claim to be an Israelite because you're not. The whole idea of being the Israel is that Christ is blessing you, and he doesn't bless people who reject him. I mean, that's a logical error. See, he gives them prophecy. He sees to it that his prophecies are fulfilled. You can opt out, but it doesn't change the outcome of the prophecy. And this is what pastors have done in the New Testament. They said, well, he came, they killed him, so that prophecy's gone. Well, no, you opted out. Your family tree's been opted out, but the rest of the people that believe in Christ, the prophecy is still going to be fulfilled. So let's go forward from chapter 33 to 49, see how everything else connects. Jacob and Esau reconcile, and it appears there's no bad blood between them. Esau has been blessed as well during the time Jacob has been gone. If you notice in 36:7, he's had a lot of flocks and he's done well. So he reconciles. He's apparently either he's not still mad at Jacob or he doesn't act mad. So in 35:1 of Genesis, God again tells Jacob to continue on to the city of Bethel and build an altar. It mentions the terror of God. This was just after the incident with their sister, Dinah. And that really means it's referring to God, the shield. So that's, in other words, this is Yahovah. In another place, it used the word hornets, and you'll see the whole exact same idea there. Here it's called a terror. I think the terror was actually hornets because it mentions this is later on. So the hornet was in the lands around them to shield them from harm during their travels. That was the idea. I forget where that is, but it's up farther. At any rate, in 35:9 through 15, Yahovah confirms the name change to Israel because Jacob and his posterity will continue the family heritage to have power with God. It's unconditional. It's passed to him. Now there'll be a 12 sons, which will branch out from there, and Yahovah will be the one that will uphold the family heritage because he'll be giving them power in their travels, protecting them, fighting for them, and all that kind of thing. So that is the family heritage. And I think that's important that everybody knows if they're part of this family, they have this family heritage. It hasn't gone away. The people who call on Christ have the family heritage. All right? That's what I'm trying to get at. So I am God Almighty, and this is in this 35:9 to 11. A nation and a company of nations, and then it mentions the kings and the land, same as coming from Abraham. As I promised to Abraham and to Isaac, I will give to you and your posterity. So here's where the blessings, the Abrahamic covenant, starting in chapter 12, was passed to Isaac, and then it's passed to Jacob right here. So this great nation and commonwealth in chapter 48, which is the same nation here in chapter 35, are these Christian Israel nations. But that idea kind of started back in, he's quoting 17 of Genesis 4 through 8. So if you're an Israelite and you choose to opt out and follow Moloch, it'll only change you and your family tree, not all of Israel. It'll only change your family. Okay, so I quoted 37:9 and the symbology in Revelation chapter 12. In 37:7 to 8, Joseph's first dream came true 3 times, as we see. In 42, where his brothers bowed to him. That was the first dream. And there's where they bowed. those 3 times. But when did this 37:9 prophecy come true? Where are these nations of Israelites that embrace Yahovah as Christ, the shield, the stone, and the scepter from Genesis? They have a family heritage of worshiping Christ and following God's law and the justice and judgment, which we read about before. They can talk to God directly, which means prayer, and he will command his angels to act from them, which is the idea of the power from God, or maybe it's Christ himself. Either way, this one is called the shield. He either does it himself or he commands an angel to do it. But that's your family heritage when you call on him, you see. Now, you need to realize you're part of the covenant. That's the whole idea of God's covenant people. So Abraham and Sarah both have a prophecy concerning them as having a posterity. They couldn't be counted for their number, and those were kings and priests, as we read before, starting around chapter 17. So then there's the unalienable rights claim, or God-given rights. There's only one group of people who can claim God-given rights, and that's these people that have power with God. And that their rights are unalienable or unalienable, either way, from a family heritage. That's the whole point of this. So our ancestors, when they wrote the Constitution, it was up to maintain our rights as a family, as a heritage that we inherited from the Abrahamic covenant. That's the whole idea of what we created here in this country of our forefathers. So now, their compiled blessings and prophecies are detailed by Jacob, Israel, and in chapter 48 and 49 as 12 families of witnessing Israelites for Christ under the leadership of Joseph through his 2 anointed sons. He anointed those 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and that's where it happened. They're anointed by Jacob with the culmination of prophecies that must be realized within their family tree. Can't change to someone else. It wouldn't be a prophecy.
That's right.
For the family. That's a complete violation of how the Bible reads. Either that or you just don't believe it. Why are you reading it if you don't believe the prophecy is going to come true? Now, I know a lot of churches and pastors try to kind of blend that in with just everybody and say, well, it was this and now it's that, blah, blah, blah. No, Christ does the prophecy. Either you opt in or you opt out. Christ fulfills the prophecy. If you inject yourself into that and say, well, I'm going to act out, so that ends the prophecy. No, that ends you. It doesn't end the prophecy. You understand? It's a logical error the way pastors are teaching it. And I know everybody's just taught that, but you got to realize that destroys the prophecy. Okay? So, and I'm saying it's only been since 2020 that the modern day posterity of Jacob has been able to go back en masse to the Holy Mountain at Sinai in Saudi Arabia and verify that all these things that happened in the Exodus, in other words, are still there. I mean, everything you see in Exodus is still sitting there. So maybe if we can visit it and offer a prayer, learn their family history, see the evidence of the Exodus and the proof of the event. And they crossed over at Nuweiba Beach, and we've had underground drone footage. We've got all the evidence we need. They can understand how it applies to them today if they just go back and realize all this is there. It's all available to them right now, but it's really only been available for a couple of years, where we can actually go there and put our hand on the first menorah that was engraved into the rock. It's still there. Okay. Now, I think we need to go a little beyond on this. Some of these things, like this story here where we covered the birth of Pharez and Zerah in chapter 38 to Judah, I think it's overlooked in the fact that they're mentioned in Matthew 1:3. And I think few are willing to point out there's 2 completely separate family trees of Judah in the renewed Testament. I think they should investigate the story of the scarlet thread, which is, if you read it, it mentions that since these descendants are kindred of the Israel people and part of God's chosen. There's no reason to think that Zerah is not part of God's chosen people. More than likely, they left Egypt even before the Exodus and went across the Mediterranean Eli could talk some about that, but I just wanted to add it in here because it's part of the story. In chapter 39, I don't think it could be made clear that Joseph had power with God. Verses 39, 2 through 6, and 21 through 23 are specific that Yahweh was with Joseph to bless him. So we read that Joseph had power with God to interpret dreams. In 48, that's not something you get by yourself. That's part of power with God. If you're interpreting them accurately, let's put it that way. Then in 41, 9 through 16, we have this first story of the chief butler who spoke up for Joseph and confirmed that he had correctly interpreted his dream and the baker's dreams previously, and this was when he was in prison. Again, Joseph confirms it is a power with God in 41, 16, 25, 28, and 32, not just him personally. So he gives the credit to God himself that he was the one that gave him the correct interpretation of the dream. So that's what that's about. The Pharaoh is convinced Joseph has power with God and appoints him second in command of his kingdom. He realizes that, not everybody can do that. So he concedes that Joseph has the Spirit of God. That's the term it uses in verse 38 to 40. In 43, 24, it indicates his steward, Joseph's steward, in other words, knew about Joseph's God and that power. In 45, 5 to 8, it tells us that Joseph perceived he was sent to Egypt by God as a blessing to the posterity of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, I can't really see my time here. Okay, so we still got. I guess we should just end it here. Let me.
I had a comment I wanted to make an add back on when we were talking where the people were. I think it's important that we realize that they were dispersed among the nations, and the nations are listed in chapter 10 of Genesis as being the descendants of Adam and Noah, and that they became known in the New Testament as Gentiles. I think that when people read the New Testament and they start looking for the Israelites, they say, "Well, I can't find them." Well, you just need to, in many places, change the word Gentile to Israel, house of Israel. And I think that's a starting place for people.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I guess this would be the best place to start, but stop here. We've already gone our 40-minute limit. Yahweh is speaking to Jacob and confirms the prophecy that he would be a great nation. So, that prophecy was given to Joseph. It was passed on to his children by Jacob, and that's a good place to end up. We need to go through all these prophecies in 49 as well. That was kind of where we would have to wrap up Genesis to continue through that. And obviously, we don't have enough time to do that. So let's just stop off right here. So let me end my screen share. So we're going to end at 108.
Well, you did a good job. You covered a lot of good information.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Let me go ahead and close the show out, and then we can talk a little bit if we want. So okay. Just hold on a second.